interested in like finance or business as a whole, hopefully you guys will reach out and use me as a resource. I guess a bit about myself. I can share a bit about myself, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer it. As you know, it was briefly mentioned, my name's Anson, currently a junior at Berkeley studying econ. I did the typical 2-year path at City College San Francisco, transferred out, I believe, fall 2022, and I was president of ABG fall 2021. Right now, very interested in investment banking, finance side, also consulting. I'm interning at investment bank next summer, and overall, that's like kind of the intro. As briefly mentioned, I went to Wolford High School, grew up in the Bay Area, and overall, very excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, are you ready to just go ahead with the questions?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, cool. So we have 8 questions, and then after that, we're gonna let the members ask you questions if they have any, if any came up.
Sounds good.
All right. So the first question is, what are some activities, clubs, or organizations you worked with before transferring to Berkeley?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. So what are some activities, clubs, or organizations you worked with before transferring to Berkeley?
Yeah, so during my time at CCSF, pretty much everything was online. As I briefly mentioned, a lot of my extracurriculars was related to CCSF. As I mentioned, I was president of ABG fall 2021. I was also outreach coordinator for a while. I also served on the ASC as the VP of Finance. And overall, in terms of community kind of activities, a lot of it was, as I mentioned, related to overall CCSF. During my time at CCSF, I did a bunch of internships on the side, so that kind of took a lot of time out of my day, but I think ASC and ABG was kind of the ones that took a lot of my involvement.
Cool.
That sounds amazing. Second question is, how did you find and land internships in community college?
Yes, as you guys might realize, coming from a CC to Berkeley, landing internships is extremely difficult, I'd say. I remember sending like hundreds of applications as a CCSF student and essentially not hearing back from anyone, so that was relatively tough, but I think persistence is definitely a key, and also like reaching out to a bunch of like mentors and talking to like career centers, stuff like that really helped me. I remember my first internship, it was like my 200th application on like my 200th email that I sent out asking for an internship, and I finally landed a coffee chat with the firm. It was a private equity firm, and it wasn't anything special. It was like sending out 50 emails like every week or something like that, and also like brushing up on knowledge within a specific industry definitely helps you a lot. I remember walking into my interview, and a lot of the questions they asked me, they're relatively simple just because I was able to take the time and prepare for those overall. But I always like to say, after you land your first kind of solid internship, it's kind of like a compounding effect where landing the internships or jobs after becomes exceptionally easier.
And quick question, so these internships, did you find them through Handshake or any organizations in specific, or did you just reach out to companies?
Yeah, so I just reached out to companies. Private equity is a relatively the recruitment process is relatively strict, I'd say. Like, they have on-cycle recruiting, so it was very difficult for me to apply through a job application. I just looked at a company that I really liked and sent out 20 emails to everyone that worked there, and eventually one person kind of responded, and I was able to kind of take that and leverage it into an offer.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And now for the third question is, how was the process of transitioning to UC Berkeley as a junior transfer, and how did you find your community, as in close friends and network?
Yeah, so I guess the transition was relatively difficult, truth be told. I think it's something that people tend to underestimate. My time at CCSF was pretty much all online, so I wasn't able to go in person to classes and speak to people. And when I came to Berkeley, it switched from the environment of a virtual environment to an in-person environment. Luckily for me, I knew some people that attended Berkeley from my high school, but overall it was definitely really tough. I'd say a piece of advice is put yourself out there. For me, what really helped me was joining organizations which I felt really passionate about. I'm part of this business fraternity here on campus, and kind of through that organization, I was able to meet a lot of my close friends. But for people that are in that transition period, or is currently in the process of transferring to like let's say any other college, I'd say definitely put yourself out there, apply to as many clubs as possible. If you know, which not many people do know what they want to do, try to find like an environment where like a lot of people have like very similar beliefs as you or like want to study the same thing as you. I think it definitely helps.
Okay. All right. Seems like you joined a lot of different like communities. What would you say, what resources and opportunities at UC Berkeley do you believe has best benefited you so far?
Yeah, so UC Berkeley, I'd say was not as helpful as CCSF, truth be told. Like when you transfer to these like big name colleges, no one really cares. I talked to counselors and they're truth be told, like not helpful at all compared to like the counselors at CCSF. Just because there's like so many students, everyone wants to like do everything and it gets kind of annoying at times. But I'd say, kind of going back to my first point about finding an organization or like a community on campus that really resonates with what you want to do will help out a lot. Like I mentioned, I joined a business fraternity. I'm very interested in finance as a whole, and kind of through that environment, I was able to get like pipelines into jobs. I was able to reach out to mentors within that organization to help me on like whether it be behaviorals or technical interviews. It also helps a lot on building friends because back to my point about like surrounding yourself with like individuals that you can resonate with and talk about your interests, I think helps a lot. But I'd say cherish your time at CCSF. Like reach out to a lot of the counselors. I'd say like the counselors here are like they care a lot compared to like Berkeley. Like Berkeley, no one gives a damn. So like definitely take the time to research what you want to do prior to transferring to Berkeley. Like find the community that you enjoy. There's like a list of like campus organizations you can search up on like regarding what school you want to transfer to, and definitely help a lot.
Okay, so now that you've been now you're a junior, right?
Yeah.
At Berkeley. So far, what is your most notable takeaway from studying economics at UC Berkeley? And would you choose UC Berkeley again, and why?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part first. Coming into CCSF, I kind of already knew I wanted to go to Berkeley. I was too lazy to do the Common App and apply for private school, so no private schools for me. Other UCs, I got into UCLA, but then I was like, I don't want to go out to LA. I want to be near the Bay Area, so decided to go to UC Berkeley. So UC Berkeley was a relatively easy choice for me. And do you mind reminding me the first part of the question?
Oh, yeah. So what is your most notable takeaway from studying economics at UC Berkeley?
Okay, that's definitely a tough question. I'd say most notable is, truth be told, I don't think there's any notable takeaways. You learn about the economy, the classes are great, the professors are great, they're all like extremely smart, but when you teach in class of like 400 people, it's really hard to build that genuine connection with your professor. But I'd say most notable takeaway is don't procrastinate in classes. In CCSF, I could like procrastinate all the time, like ChatGPT, everything, but at Berkeley, the classes are actually hard. So definitely most notable takeaway is take your time, like actually study. Like there's no BS at Berkeley. It's actually pretty tough. Everyone's like so hardcore and they try so hard. It's kind of annoying at times, but I think that's like my most notable takeaway.
Okay. Interesting.
You mentioned that persistent is key when coming to find internships. Do you have any other advice you can give to people who are trying to break into the finance industry?
Yeah, so I'd say this kind of applies to all fields, industries, or sectors of jobs you're looking for. One, I think the key thing is to really understand what you want to do. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people, they just want to apply to 500 different jobs in varying different sectors or industries. And it's really tough because you really want to be able to build a specialized skill set for the field you want to enter. That's what kind of gives you a competitive edge. Mm-hmm. And back to the point about persistence, it also connects to the idea of being able to create a structure around kind of how you want to approach certain jobs or certain industries as a whole, because each industry has a very different recruiting cycle. Each different industries has very different criteria. So it's very important to understand what industry you want to go into and why, and also be able to reach out to mentors within those fields. I'd say in terms of advice is be very willing to reach out to people that are doing stuff that you want to do, because I'd say like 95% of chance they'll probably know more than you. And, as a student at CCSF who wants to break into finance, I'd say one of the things that helped me out a lot was like reaching out to people that were already at Berkeley that was doing what I wanted to do. And if you don't necessarily know what you want to do, that's like absolutely fine. But if you have an idea, like reach out to people, ask them questions. We have LinkedIn for a reason. We have counselors for a reason. We have professors that's a reason. Like there's also resources out there to help you a lot. And another thing is like I want to mention like network is extremely important when it comes to landing a job. I think as a student you tend to not realize that as much as you do maybe as a student, but your network is ultimately what lands you jobs, because then they can refer you, and referrals kind of give you a higher chance of like landing a job rather than sending in applications.
Great. Thank you so much for your insight on that. Now, just to be more specific, can you describe like a typical day as someone who works in finance?
So, to clarify the question, are you looking into like industries like consulting, investment banking?
Yeah.
M&A?
Yeah, so kind of your takeaway on what you have worked on personally. I believe you have done like internships that kind of gave you an insight. How did that look like for you, like a normal day?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start off with my PE internship, private equity. I also did some in investment banking and wealth management, so I'll talk about those later also. But in terms of private equity, for people that don't understand, what private equity is, you're essentially the company that you're working for levers a bunch of debt and they buy out the company, they fix it up, and then they sell it at a higher price. That's how they make their money. So basically, my time as a PE analyst, I'd say because it was my first internship was relatively light. It was like the typical 30 to 40 hours a week that you see in like finance internships. And I'd say, day to day regarding the analyst is you're doing a lot of the, pardon my French, but a lot of the bitch work, like you're like sourcing deals, you're reading through articles like pretty much all your time. And for me, I really enjoy it because, I'm a very technical guy. I'd say I really like understanding stuff on a conceptual level, especially when it comes to finance. And, I really enjoyed my experience there. There was a lot of financial modeling. I was able to like talk with like clients that work at like Fortune 500 companies, and it was a great overall experience. However, again, like if you're not interested in finance, you're not interested in like looking at like long documents, reading about financials, I don't think finance would be the ideal environment for you to work in. But that was kind of like a quick overview of my day-to-day as a PE analyst. And then when it came to investment banking, I'm not sure if a lot of you guys are familiar with investment banking, but investment banking is one of those like hardo like finance jobs. And like when you think about like the work, the day-to-day of like an IB analyst, you're working like 70, 80 hours a week, which is usually the average. So it's definitely a lot of hours. It's a very high pressure environment. The transactions that you're dealing with is like in the hundreds of millions of dollars, alongside like billions. So definitely very stressful, but you get to learn a lot and you get to meet a lot of smart people. In terms of day-to-day, it's very similar to like my PE analyst job, where a lot of financial modeling, a lot of looking at companies that are undergoing mergers and acquisitions, trying to buy out other companies. So a lot of research-based and industry-based like papers that I wrote. And then wealth management, I worked out at Wells Fargo last summer for wealth management, and it was actually pretty chill. Like I was clocking in like 40 hours a week, but truth be told, I was working like 10 hours a week. I was like sitting doing my homework on the side, so it was a pretty chill experience. Not as technical. I would say you don't learn a lot, but you get to meet a lot of down-to-earth people that aren't that try-hard. And a lot of it was like building like research reports for like high net worth individuals, kind of like looking at like their financial positioning, looking at like equities for them to purchase. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to go more in depth.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers the question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right, all good. So we're gonna end off with the last question. What do you want to do when you graduate? Since you're already a junior, I'm sure you're probably thinking about like what are your plans after graduation?
Yeah. So to give some more backstory, I'm technically a junior right now, but I'm planning on taking a gap year to like travel for a bit, because truth be told, I'm tired of school. Like I'm tired of working. I just want to relax. But I'm just trying to sleep sometimes. But So technically, I'm a sophomore, but overall, I'd say my goal is I have a very traditional finance path in mind, which is like out of college, 2 years investment banking, and then maybe like my MBA, like a master's in business, and then go into the private equity side, which is like the quote unquote buy side, and then through then, I don't know, like I'm still young, I'm still trying stuff out. I think I'll stay in private equity for a couple of years, maybe like try to start my own like venture business, but we'll see. I don't really know.
Awesome. So right now we could let. Oh wait. Yeah. So if you want, you can just go ahead and talk about investment banking and private equity right now. Give us like a little bit of an insight on that, and I think after that we can jump to questions.
Great, sounds good. I guess before I go, in that segment, just a quick question out of curiosity, and I'm just trying to be as helpful as I can. Like, is anyone in the Zoom or the room like interested in finance, or is there like a specific like part of business that you guys are interested? Because I think it'd be more helpful for me to kind of like try to offer that help.
Right. So in the room, they're all business related majors, as in we're in ABG. Does anyone have a specific thing that they have in mind that they would want to hear about?
Or are any of you interested in finance or banking? Raise your hand. Different kind of business.
Yeah.
There's one over here.
Finance and no one's interested in finance.
I mean, it's a good learning opportunity. Maybe it's because we don't know too much about it. So honestly, just go into it if you'd like, Anson.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if you guys like fell asleep. It's fine though. But
No.
I guess to give a quick overview, finance as a whole can be viewed in like very different segments. Like one is like when you think of venture capital, which is early stage companies. You think of like the early stage like Shopify. You think of the early stage like companies that are looking to grow and like investors invest the money. And then there's like the middle, which is like private equity or like growth equity, or it's growth equity in the middle, which is like companies that are, or funds that are looking to invest in like mid-sized companies with the hopes of like realizing high returns. So it's venture capital, it's growth equity, and then it's private equity, which is mature companies, as I mentioned, the role that I worked in. And private equity companies or private equity firms, a lot of the intentions behind it is helping mature companies raise a bunch of like, or helping private equity funds raise a bunch of debt to buy out mature companies and then essentially flip it. So it's like a real estate business where you're buying like a cheap property and then you're selling it in the future. That's one side of like investing, which is a part of finance, and then another side is investment banking, which is the role that I'm working in right now, where a lot of your responsibilities is helping large companies acquire other companies, and then that's what helps them grow, that's what helps the economy boom. It's also known as mergers and acquisitions, and investment bankers, aside from mergers and acquisitions, also do like capital raising, which is when a company wants to like raise funds to help its operations. It could be equity raises, it could be debt raises. So that's like kind of another segment of investment banking. And then there's like restructuring, like companies that are going through like a distressed time within its business operations, and they need an investment banker to advise them on how they can improve their business. So as I mentioned, it's like investing side, it's venture capital, it's growth equity, and then it's private equity. That's like the investing side. And then advisory side is investment banking, and then there's accounting. Don't go into accounting because it's boring as heck. I don't really want to talk about accounting because it's pretty boring. But and then there's consulting, and I think consulting is another subsector of finance where it's more so a company comes to you with a problem, whether it be like they want you to help them survey their customer demographics, whether it be like preparing a presentation for their investors. Like they're doing a lot of like PowerPoints and stuff like that. So with that being said, those are like the main core parts of finance. I guess before I go more in depth on like investment banking, does anyone have any questions about those core parts? Great. Okay. Sounds good. Great. Okay. So I guess I'll speak more on like investment banking and private equity, pros and cons, what you do. Not necessarily day to day, but just overall like responsibilities, and then also like why would you want to go into finance as a whole. So to start out with investment banking, as I kind of mentioned, it's a very advisory role. When you think about investment banking, you think about like banks like Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. These are like the big financial players within the field that do the most transactions when it comes to like mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, and essentially the company raises like, you know, a bunch of money for the companies, and then they take like a 2% fee, and they make like a bunch of money. And overall, what your day-to-day as an investment banker is going to look like is you're going to be working like 80 hours a week. You're going to be working like 70 hours a week. It pays a lot, but you're going to be in an environment where it's high pressure, it's high stakes, it's very hierarchical, if that's a word, like based on a hierarchy. You go in as an analyst and you get promoted to associate, vice president, and then managing director. So back to my point about like what investment bankers do or investment analysts do is you're looking at a company's financial positions and advising them on what to do in regards to their capital, whether it be buying another company, whether it be analyzing potential opportunities to exit, or like, you know, yeah, pretty much all that. And pros and cons of investment banking. Pros, you get a lot of exposure to like high profile deals. You know, when you think about like companies that you use on a day-to-day basis, like Lyft, Uber, or like, you know, eBay, or whatever people use nowadays. But you get to look at like these types of companies, and you get to look at their financial positionings, and you get to help them. So you're involved in a lot of high stakes deals. And in terms of like an employer where you're trying to exit into other fields, it's incredible experience because you're able to share a very niche experience that no one else really has except for you. And you're able to talk about that at an extremely high level, and you're able to understand like a specific industry at an incredibly high level. So one, it's again, it's extremely competitive, but you get to learn a lot. And another pro, if you know, people care about this, I personally care about it, but you get paid a lot. Just to give some perspective, I think base pay for an investment banker on the street is like 110K, including bonus. And bonus is usually like 30 to 50%, depending on how the year goes. So you're making a bunch of money out of undergrad. You get a lot of experience, but the trade-off is you're in an environment where it's extremely high stakes and it's extremely competitive. And everyone you're competing with is like, these are like Ivy League people, bro. It's like kind of annoying sometimes, but you know, their egos are fat sometimes. But okay, that's like a bit of a tangent. Another pro, what did I say? I mentioned this for like exit opportunities. You know, investment banking, it's very competitive, but it's really good for individuals who like that quantitative mindset, who really want to learn a lot, who want to hit the ground running at an early age. Because when you think about it, if you don't necessarily know what you want to do, you know, you can place yourself in an environment where you get that exposure, and then you have like pretty much limitless exit opportunities when it comes to what you want to do in the future. You know, if you're up to working like 70 hours a week. And then in terms of cons, you're working long hours, you know, you're doing bitch work, it's very hierarchical, like, you know, people are going to yell at you sometimes because everyone's like, you know, high blood pressure in this environment. Another con, yeah, that's pretty much all the cons I can think of, but it's extremely high, it's extremely competitive and extremely like high pressure environment. We're probably not going to get much sleep, but you know, the money's worth it sometimes, I'd say. So that's investment banking. Private equity, as I mentioned, is like what investment bankers tend to exit to after like 2 years of investment banking. Private equity is a bit less, I guess, a bit less hard work when it comes to hours. You're probably working like 60 to 70 compared to banking where it's like 80 hours, obviously depending on which like firm you go to, but usually a lot of people exit, you're making a bunch more money, you're working less, but the deals you're working on is more of an investor's perspective. So instead of you acting as an advisor, such as an investment banking analyst, instead of acting as an advisor for individuals or the companies that are looking to, you know, buy other companies, you yourself is helping your company acquire a company, hold it for like a couple of years, and then sell it. So the money that a private equity firm makes is the difference between the purchase price and the exit price, and they basically keep that, and then, you know, it's a bunch of money, because when you think about like transactions with $1 billion, you buy a company for 500 million and you sell it for $1 billion, you know, your firm makes $500 million, and that's a bunch of money given like a short time period of usually like 5 to 7 years. So day to day, a PE analyst is really similar to investment banking, where you're doing a lot of like financial modeling, you're researching a lot about a specific company, whether to acquire it or not, However, the intentions and kind of the reason why you're kind of, essentially the like goal is different, right? You're not advising, you're more so investing. So for people that really want to be investors or interested in like the stock market or interested in like the overall markets of companies, I'd say it's a really good role to go into. And again, to emphasize, you're probably making more money than an IB analyst when you kind of exit. And then what else? That's investment. And then venture capital. Venture capital is more so like for the entrepreneurs, I guess. Venture capital is like early stage companies that just raised money and they want to grow. And when you work in venture capital, a lot of what you're doing is you're betting on the idea that this company is going to grow like 100x in the future. So when you think about Facebook, it's early stages. It was funded by venture capital. Venture capital like puts a lot of money into early stages of the companies, and then by the time the company grows to like where it is now, the venture capital firm like makes a bunch of money. But that's kind of finance in a nutshell.
Right. Quick question now. So, which one do you like better? Like private equity, investment banking, or venture capital? Those are the ones that you talked about. So,
Yeah.
For yourself, which one do you find better and why?
Yeah. So I'd say it definitely depends on the situation. So right now, I prefer investment banking just because there's more exit opportunities in the field after coming out of undergrad. But if it's the question of like which one I enjoy the most, I say I enjoy private equity the most, just because investment banking, you don't really have that idea of like self fulfillment, because like when you think about investing versus advisory, investing is like more so you're able to build your own like rationale of why you want to invest in a company and what makes this company great. How does it stand out from its competitors, and like overall how it's performing in the industry relative to its peers. So private equity, I'd say it's more so being able to like create your own independent thinking, obviously with like the right analysis and stuff, but it's more like free will compared to investment banking where you're helping companies buy other companies. Private equity is more so on the investing side, so I tend to enjoy that a bit more.
All right. And I was also wondering, so you mentioned how it was a very competitive and high pressure environment. How can you still be successful in that environment, and like how can you still thrive, especially as a student?
Yeah, so I guess this advice is applicable to all jobs as a whole. There's always like stuff you can do to stand out. I mentioned it's highly competitive. It's highly stressful, but individuals that work in investment banking, the common trend is you work in a bank for like 2 years and then you exit because people don't want to stay in that high pressure environment. But for the people that thrive in those environments, they tend to like place themselves in positions where they can learn more, so that can like come out as taking on more responsibility or being more communicative, having better soft skills, having the intangible aspects that make you different than others. Although the field is very competitive, I think what really differentiates like a student versus like another student is the intangible skill sets that they develop, prior to coming to this job. Like I love to kind of share a story, and like so like one of the people that I work with, like they worked in like customer service all their lives, versus like another kid that their family's rich and they just came from Ivy League. But the moment they like hit the desk and they hit the job, the person that worked in like customer service had those soft skills to deal with the high pressure environment that the Ivy League student doesn't necessarily have. So I'd say it's a lot of like the intangibles that come with the person you are, the morals that you hold, and like just how much you want to learn or take away from like a specific job. Because there's always more you can do. Like investment banking, there's unlimited stuff you can do, and some people just tend to not want to do that just because one, they're already tired. But that's what kind of separates like the high achievers versus the people that just come in hopes of like staying for 2 years and then exiting.
Right. So you said you can always do things that can help you stand out. What do you think has helped you stand out?
Yeah, so again, like my experience is very different than others, but I say the thing that really made me stand out, like from the transition from like CCSF to Berkeley is during my time at CCSF, especially in a virtual environment, I kind of knew that I wanted to transfer to Berkeley. I kind of knew I wanted to go to finance, and I knew that it was an incredibly competitive field, and the people that I was competing against were Ivy League students. So the first thing I did was like do what I can do and like try to involve myself in as much extracurriculars, try to build up as much experience. obviously you're in a position where you don't have the competitive edge because if you go to like Harvard as a freshman, like for Harvard, like you're gonna get jobs ASAP, right? But like as a CCSF student applying for jobs, you might not have that competitive edge. But when you do, when you get that, first internship, you can sell the shit out of that story, right? Like a question that, interviewers always ask, like what, makes you stand out than other people? It's, my situation. I went to community college, but I was still able to do this, versus like the Ivy League schools, kids who, are essentially on the same level, even though they went to Ivy League schools. So like always being able to like kind of plan ahead and like place yourself in an environment and not use excuses to, differentiate your situation from other people.
Right. Well, I think right now we can jump to the questions. If anybody has any, I would love to hear them. Oh, over there we have a hand.
I wanted to ask, how do you believe being an economics major has helped you working in finance?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, you can, be a little louder.
I wanted to ask, how does being an economics major help you work in finance?
Truth be told, it doesn't. Like when I was applying to Berkeley, there's like the business program, which is awesome, which is econ, and then there's a bunch of other things. I didn't want to do business just because like I was looking at the course curriculum, and I thought to myself like, bro, like it's kind of stupid. I'm not gonna lie. And I was looking at the econ, professors. I was looking at the econ classes, and I just thought to myself, if I'm going to college and if I'm going to be paying like $30,000 to go to college, I want to at least learn something that I wouldn't be able to learn by myself. So I'd say like going to econ, it's very theoretical, right? You're learning about like the labor economics, you're learning about like health economics, the Chinese economy, you're learning about like all these very theory-based concepts, and it might not necessarily be applicable to, the job that you go into. Also, I also want to add as a side note, when you go into an actual job, 90% of the stuff you learn in school you don't use. So yeah, so there's also that thing, but back to my point is very theoretical, at times it might not be applicable to an actual like finance job, but it was just a curiosity of mine to go into econ. I'd say, I have friends that do like health or bio or like biology, they do like gender studies, they do like public policy, they do like English, they major in a lot of different things and they're still able to go into finance. So I think it's very important to like how you sell your story, why you want to go into finance. But in my case, like during my interviews, no one asked me why I picked economics. They asked me like what I did in my prior internships. Like I don't think people really care about your major unless you're like CS, because that's different. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. I saw a question.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned you did a bunch of internships working at Wells Fargo and like IB. So how were you able to get those internships? What was your recruiting process like? And like, was it through networking or did you find through certain websites? Like, what was that like?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear any of that.
Oh, let me say, because I'm closer. So
Yeah.
she was asking how you said you landed internships in Wells Fargo and IB. She was kind of wondering how was the process of finding that internship, if it was through like networking or some website, and also
What's the recruiting process
yeah,
like?
what's the recruiting process like?
Okay, yeah, that is a loaded question.
Yes.
Okay, I'll answer like the recruiting process. I know like somewhere like along my like tangent, I mentioned like it's very important to understand what you want to do, and the reason because that's important is all jobs in finance have very different recruiting timelines, and like for IB specifically, you recruit a year before your summer internship. So for my summer, which is like this May, I'm going to LA. I recruited for this job a year before, and they basically hold your spot for a year, and then you come in as a summer intern. But that's like a bit like more detailed. But in terms of like recruiting process, I can't answer that very specifically just because every recruiting process is very different. That's why it's very important to know what you want to do. If you have something specific, like a specific job or a specific field, like I'd be happy to answer that. But in regards to like the general sense, is it's very hard to tell because recruiting cycles is different amongst all firms, all industries, all jobs, all opportunities. And in regards to I believe was a question on like how I landed internships or something like that. Like, what
Yeah,
websites I
like
used.
how did you find it? Did you use websites, networking?
Yeah. So I believe first year of CCSF when I knew I wanted to do investment banking, how my process went was, okay, like I know I want to do investment banking. I'm probably not gonna get the opportunity to like intern at these like major like investment banks like Goldman Sachs, Bank of America. So basically I like went on Google Maps, like I went on Google, searched up like the top 100 like regional banks in my area that offered investment banking, and like I compiled a list, and then I essentially cold emailed all of them. Like each like regional bank probably has like around like maybe like 7 to 10 members who work in investment banking. I like utilize like resources or like applications like Apollo. I like pulled all their emails. I basically created a template and just sent it all out. So it wasn't like anything like special. It was like a lot of typing, but like there's so much typing like it got tiring. But yeah, it was nothing special. I did what you call off-cycle recruiting. So off-cycle recruiting is like when you recruit without submitting a formal application for the job. You just reach out to them and say I'm interested. So that's what I did for my first application, and then through that experience, I was referred to my second internship. And then for Wells Fargo was the on-cycle where it was actually like a formal application. I applied, I like reached out to a bunch of people that were working at Wells Fargo. I like great coffee chats with them. They liked me. They pulled my resume. I had like a 3-round interview, and then I crushed it. It was like whatever. And then and then I got the job.
Nice.
But oh yeah, also in terms of like resources, when you guys transfer, whether it be like Berkeley, USC, like all the UCs or whatever, you're gonna be like given a handshake kind of portal, and you're able to use that to find jobs. The thing about like CCSF handshake is because it's not quote unquote like a target school, you don't necessarily get like the top tier jobs that you necessarily want, just because they don't have like the programs with those like large companies. But when you transfer to like a school, a lot of the job opportunities that you see on Handshake is going to be more high profile. So that also helps a lot.
Right. Any more questions? Oh yeah, in the back.
If you don't mind me asking, what do you plan on doing with your degree?
With my degree?
Yeah, like what do you plan on doing after education? Like what's your career path?
My econ degree, I'm not planning on using that at all. Like to be honest, but as I mentioned, I'm also looking to do an MBA, so hopefully like I'll use that to like transfer to another field. But again, like I'd say for finance specifically, like your degree isn't the thing that like really makes you stand out. Like obviously if you're going to like SWE or like software engineer or anything like tech related, yeah, having a CS degree or like having any like technical degree will help you a lot, because CS classes are actually really helpful when it comes to like learning like Python, C Suite, and like all those programming. But in terms of like econ, like, bro, I'm not gonna like talk about like supply and demand during an interview. Like, no one really like cares about that. So I think degrees at times can be overrated, but the most important thing is your school name. I think the school name, the school that you go to will help you tremendously in comparison to the actual degree, because again, back to my point, like if you're applying to a job as a freshman, going to Harvard versus someone that's like applying that goes to like, CCSF, not shitting on CCSF, but like, there's like, there's kind of like a gap.
Right. You also had a question?
Yeah. This is kind of a similar question, but more about clubs and organizations at Berkeley. And I don't know if you already went over this earlier, but what clubs or what kind of business organization and clubs are you a part of, and what was the recruiting process for that, and like what advice do you have for people who want to join clubs and organizations as a transfer, especially at Berkeley?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So like I mentioned, I'm part of business fraternities, Beta Alpha Psi, and like when in Berkeley specifically, there's like 3 main business communities or like 3 main business fraternities on campus, and I just picked the one where I thought I would like vibe with the people the most. And one thing that people don't talk about is like the recruiting process for these orgs. Like, goddamn, like landing these orgs are harder than landing a job, truth be told. Like, like my interview at these Berkeley clubs were harder than like my interviews at at actual jobs, just because when you think about Berkeley, it's a highly competitive school. Obviously it's different like at other schools, but Berkeley, highly competitive. Everyone is like really try hard. They all want to stack their resume with these like, business orgs and stuff like that. They get like 400 applicants a semester, and like they only take like 7. So it's extremely competitive in a sense. That's why it's like, I think it'd be very important for you guys, if you guys are looking to join these like business fraternities as a whole, is, polish up your resume, polish up your behaviorals, be able to like stand out as a candidate. But there's also like, Berkeley is a big school. There's a lot of organizations. You don't have to join the top business fraternity to stand out, but the top like business organizations tend to have the most resources, whether it be like going into tech, going into finance, going into business, or like going into whatever jobs. They have that kind of like, they have those plugs to help you get into these firms, just because they're so old, and like a lot of the people in those firms tend to like go to like really good like companies as a whole. So I'd say definitely aim for them, but don't get discouraged if you don't get in them. And then back to your thing about like advice or recommendations, it kind of connects back to the other point where it's like, try to stand out. At the end of the day, we're all students. We don't want someone that comes in and like acts like they're 50 years old. Like, we want to be like around people that we actually enjoy talking to. It's like a social fit, but it's also like the technical fit. Like, for example, if you want to do like investment banking when you transfer to Berkeley, be able to talk about that passion, be able to have the technical skill sets to back up that passion, and there's a high chance that you'll probably get it.
Okay, any more questions?
My question is, kind of with your mindset now, knowing what you know now, if you were to go back to City College, let's just say, just go back to when you were at City College, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, truth be told, I wouldn't have done anything differently. Like right now, I feel like I'm in a good place. Like, I transferred to Berkeley, that was my original goal. I think I genuinely tried my best to do whatever, I did to get to Berkeley, and here I am now. If I did anything differently, I might not be here. So I would say there wasn't necessarily anything I would do differently, but, one thing that I'd say, like, if I were, if I had to pick one thing that I want to do differently, probably take more time and sleep. Like I feel like people don't like mental health is a really important thing. I feel like, especially at CCSF, where people are always like trying to compare themselves to like people that are at other schools, or like people are like always so focused on transferring out. Like, my CCSF experience was all virtual. Like, I practically like didn't talk to anyone, and I hated it. So it's like, right now you have the opportunity to be in an in-person environment, like get to know people. As I mentioned, your network is extremely important. Talk to counselors, talk to professors. They'll help you out a lot in the long run, and actually like take classes where you want to like enjoy. Because at Berkeley right now, I'm so focused on like taking classes that fulfill my degree, where I don't have time to take classes where I actually want to learn, like whether it be like, boxing, or like a cooking class, or, business law, or stuff like that. I think at Berkeley they offer a wide range of like, different classes where you can take for the sake of your own interest. Right? I know Berkeley has like a real estate class, like who offers a real estate class? So it's like, take these classes and like, actually enjoy your time. Like, it'll be fine at the end of the day. So I feel like if I had to pick something differently, it would be like enjoy my college experience more at CCSF.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Samia. Well, I don't think we have time for more questions.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for teaching us so much about private equity, investment banking, and venture capital. I was very elementary in like proficiency for that. I feel a lot more well-informed. And thank you so much for coming, Anson. Do you mind like us sending an email with your contact to anyone who wants to ask you any more questions?
Yeah, wait, you want me to type it in the chat, or?
Like anyone who signed in the sign-in form, I'll give it to them. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, right now I think we're gonna say goodbye to our guest speaker, and thank you so much.
Good luck on finals. Thank you.
Thank you.